Gentlemen, start your
My involvement was through Atlantic Cat. We sponsored for years, and a lot of my travels took me into New Brunswick. And once people understood and knew what my connection was with Scott Fraser, it immediately went to Frank Fraser. And he was an icon, he was a legend, he was whatever you want to call it, because the fact that I knew Frank Fraser, I was almost like anointed. I was okay, all right? So he carried that level of notoriety and respect amongst a lot of people.
Dad would be a hero in New Brunswick. Like we always tease him, we call him God when he goes to New Brunswick because that's where he's from. And he would be hated everywhere else because of his ability to win. He was very aggressive. He was extremely hard-nosed on the racetrack, would run into people on purpose to win shows. So he was very popular in two different ways everywhere we went.
Frank was like the type of driver, it was either win or wreck trying. Points didn't make no their mind, it was the win. And if it was a 250-lap race, if Frank led one of them laps, it was nice to win, but he'd sooner lead 250 of them.
Frank had a theory in his head. If he caught you on the racetrack and you didn't give way, he moved you out of the way. They called it the chrome horn, the bumper on the back, and he had a knack for it. He wouldn't actually wreck you, but he'd upset your car enough that if you had decent car control, you could gather it up and wouldn't get wrecked. But by the time you got it gathered up, he's long gone. And he lived by that. Believe me, it set lots of scenarios where knuckles flew later on.
Frank Fraser is a veteran of the short track, a spirited driver. He's gritty and aggressive.
Frank Fraser and me were about the two top runners, and he sort of went down the inside of me there. You know, you go in the corner as fast as you want, but then you're going to come out the other end, so he just sort of cushions you for to come through, and he got me and spun me around. Well, they started the race over, and we were starting off, and I just gave a little touch on the brakes, and he ran in the back of me. He lost his rad, so he goes in and loses a couple laps, and I won the race, but I lost the fight. So after we had the fight there, I'm the one that got to sort of beat up, and I think he broke my trophy too. But we're good buddies now, though. We're good buddies now.
I always worked with Russell White at the time, and we talked Russell, Bobby, and his other fellow, Brian, there, and Emerson talked Russell into going to Ontario and buying Don Biederman's race car. It was the best, really, as far as we're concerned, in Canada. And got talking to Frank, and he said, well, maybe we should take that car where it's the best there is, and go to New Smyrna in Florida. So Frank piled everything in his truck, towed the car to Florida, and like we had a hell of a time. It was the World Championships there, and back then, I believe it was 1977, Frank would drive the car one night, and I'd drive the car the next night. Well, all in all, I guess we did okay, over that, but that was a really good trip, and Frank was really dedicated. I don't believe I've ever seen anybody in racing to date that is any more dedicated than Frank Fraser has been.
Frank was the one who opened the door for the Maritimers to come. And come to find out later, on these 250s that Frank was running against, he was running against guys like Todd Bodine, Morgan Shepherd, Butch Lindley. At the time, it was just another car and just another number. Had no idea who the drivers were. We didn't know, but that was a caliber of drivers that he was running against and was favored to beat.
These guys that he raced against in NASCAR North, I would say half a dozen of them actually raced in the Cup cars, in the big cars, and they actually raced in what was called the Busch Series, which is now called the Xfinity Series. They actually raced in that as well.
Once upon a time when we were younger, he used to race 3 to 4 times a week in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, where there was no Trans-Canada highways, no twin highways, single-lane highways. He would race in St. John, New Brunswick, Atlantic Speedway, River Glade, and anywhere else was a show. He would come home and stay up all night because of the different rules for classes and rebuild motors. We would get home at some oddly time of the night. He'd throw us in the house, tell us to go to bed, and when we would come back out, he'd stayed up all night and completely rebuild an engine, tore it apart because of the rules for this next racetrack. And the man just, if he will not go to sleep if there's something to be done to a race car, if he's not ready to go to the race the next day.
It's amazing where he started from and how far he got. And a lot of people, a lot of people knew about it, but I don't think they understand how significant he was and what he done for stock car racing in Nova Scotia.
At one point, Junior Henley and Don Biederman were teammates, and they raced for a living. So they would go to the track and would always make sure one of them was going to win. Well, in Riverglade that one year, Dad had them covered, was going to beat them, so they were blocking most of the race, so Dad couldn't get to the front.
The race got going, and Frank and Biederman had the field, the entire field lapped. And they spun somebody out, and they were arguing, now what do we do? Everybody's lapped. Where do we put Frank and Biederman? So they went to Biederman and they asked him, what do you think we should do here? And Biederman said, I don't care what you do as long as Fraser's alongside of me.
That would be one of the biggest first memories I had of Dad, was that everyone around here wanted him to win bad enough and beat these guys that they were bringing in, that it was more like, it was almost a community effort that they ended up winning this race.
He was a mentor in ways that a lot of people wouldn't believe. If he beat you on the racetrack and you came over and asked him what he did to the car to make it go as well as he did, he would never lie to you. He would tell you everything that he did. He would tell you his setup on the car, how much air he had in the tires, which is critical, the size of the tires, all of this stuff. Never, ever kept secrets from anybody, other than when we were stretching a rule somewhere or something like that. I mean, he wouldn't openly tell the guy that's teching the car, hey, I got this in the car and I'm not allowed to have it. No. But no, he was good that way. And as he got older and started building a lot of cars for other people, he was only too willing to have them come to the shop and lend a hand at actually building their own race car.
But he'd tell you exactly what you want to know, exactly what you need to hear, and then he'll tell you how to do it and accomplish it. And then if you don't have the means or the way to do it, he'll, if he can, will give you what you need to do it. And Sean's a perfect example, and Craig Sloan-White. They're perfect examples of, younger people that Dad saw talent and ability in, that he just more or less said, here.
Yeah, for not just myself, Craig Sloan-White as well, another protege of the Frasers. We were mildly successful sportsman drivers, and a lot of that was thanks to the Frasers and setup stuff. And they just groom you to be such a hands-on and, whatever driving tips Frank can pass on. He certainly has a lot of them and has seen everything, so he's able to coach you on every facet of trying to go fast and trying to make the car fast.
I remember back, there was a guy that won several championships by the name of Greg Seward. And he used to run Sportsman. He'd come to Frank all the time, and Frank would be giving him little things like this. It reminds you like of the Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon thing. When Gordon was coming in, Earnhardt sort of tucked him under his arm and took him along. That's the same as Frank done with Greg Seward. This was back in the 70s and stuff.
I remember we were in the shop one day, Dad and Curtis and I, and Dad come up and he says, I want to talk to you two about something. And that's nothing new. All right, what do you need, Dad? He said, I want to put young Turple in Scotty's car. And we looked at him and we said, you want to what?
The same year that Scotty passed away, he actually went around to all the team members. He came to me as well. He said, look, here's what I'd like to do, but I'll only do it if you guys are in agreement. And that was basically to put a team together and take some young driver who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity and put him in the car and work with him.
I remember getting the phone call from Frank's son Frankie, telling me to stop up the shop tomorrow night if I had a chance, and I kind of had an inkling what they were going to ask me, and it was a huge honor.
And I asked him flat out, I said, why, what's going on? Well, like, why? Why now? And he goes, and he more or less just, we got to do all these amazing things, these amazing places, all these highs that we got. He may not have said it out loud, but he wanted to give back to the sport that had given us so much.
That, to me, showed me the other side of Frank Fraser, with the veneer peeled off. And that probably is the real one, okay? The other one was great for the newspapers and the racetracks and the fans, but that, to me, was the real Frank Fraser. because he did believe in helping others. He'd be as quick to give you a kick in the butt as you would a pat in the back, but it was all meant to make you a better person.
Dad was so hard on Sean. I was waiting for Sean to say, you stick that car square up, because he was telling Sean, you're not doing this, not going in the quarter far enough. And Sean's like...
I remember the race we won in Riverside, and Frank just kept telling me all day, you know, drive it in deeper, being a driving coach, and it was it's still a joke. We still joke about it every time we go there because it was such a moment, and we ended up winning the race, and, you know, probably all due to Frank coaching me to drive it in a little deeper, so.
He runs Scotty as hard, if not harder than anybody else, but he didn't beat on Scotty. And what I mean, like bounce off and run into him, cause trouble, push him out of the way. I don't ever remember Dad moving Scotty out of the way to get a spot. I don't ever remember that. So I think Dad might have cut Scotty a bit of slack. But to race wheel to wheel with him, Dad run him as hard as anything.
What I do remember was Scott and his father raced side by side for probably 25 to 30 laps, okay? Both on the edge of wrecking one another, okay? But it was a show that the fans I don't think would ever see again. And it was a father and son out front racing for first place, and it was neat to watch that. And it was, I think, anytime that the father would have a chance to share that experience with the son, it's got to be pretty neat.
They raced each other incredibly hard, but Dad didn't cause Scotty the grief he may have caused some other people. Well, we'll just put it that way. I couldn't describe or put into words what Mom put up with the group that she had to work with. It's insane. If it wasn't for Mom, Dad would be living in a tent. I've said it to hundreds of people in my life. Dad would be living in a tent somewhere because he spent every cent he had racing. Now, we never wanted for anything. Scotty and I had a great life. We had every toy you could imagine. We had the Sutherland's Lake, the cottage up there we went to all winter long, spent there. He was a great dad. But if it wasn't for Mother, no, Dad wouldn't have done a lot of the stuff he got to do if it wasn't for Mom. He's the oldest teenager you'll ever meet. He literally is. And people instantly are drawn to him that way. He jokes around, he carries on, he's a funny guy.
Quite a jokester, a great laugh, nice to hear, nice to talk with. Still enjoy going up and talking, spending time with Frank at his shop or at the track, and just a really cool deal to be able to go up there.
He'd do anything for you. And just mention the word, and it's done. Well, you know, maybe have to wait for him to go weed his garden, or maybe take the wife in the camper and go camping or something like that, or for God's sakes, don't ask him in hunting season. But I mean, other than that, it'll get done. Oh yeah, nice man.
Frank is a legend. You know, if you want to define what a legend is, somebody that's been at it as long as Frank and done as well at it as Frank, and you know, raced with the people that Frank has raced with. If there is such a thing in racing as a legend, then that would be Frank Fraser. You couldn't bestow enough honor on Frank Fraser, really, when it comes down to it, with the sport of racing, the things that Frank has done for racing over the years, you know, and the people he's helped. I don't believe that, you know, he certainly deserves being in the Hall of Fame and anything else.
My personal congratulations to Frank on being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and it looks awesome on him and his entire family. They're a class act, and yeah, I love them.
That is the proudest moment I have of Dad, is that he would care enough about the sport that gave us so much as a group that he would put someone else in Scotty's car. And that was just, that describes Dad. It's the team.
I would have to say his dedication to the sport. He still supports it today. He still builds race cars, prepares them for other guys. And I know that if he was healthier and a little bit younger, there'd be somebody else in that 00 car.
'16 East Hants Sport Hall of Fame inductee, Frank Fraser.